Alex,
Yes, Tyler.
today is episode 25.
20. Oh, man. Is it 20? No, it's 26, good sir.
Last one. Even better. So in our 25 episodes of research and learning with each other and with everybody else in the audience, have you learned anything new? Like, what's something that you've learned?
I mean, that's tough. I've learned a lot. I mean, was it just last week talking about a lot of like the sturgeon? I didn't know that there were I thought there were a lot more sturgeon than there were.
No,
But
there's only a couple. There's like a
yeah,
handful of species.
yeah. And then of course, the coolest thing was last week the paddlefish. There's only one living species left.
Right?
I
That's
mean,
insane.
and just I think the biggest thing is just how far back a lot of the things we've covered actually, even like the living species, how far back they actually
Yeah, 'cause it's
originated.
like a lot of things we cover. It's like, okay, well, here's this, and it's been around since like the Permian or the Cambrian.
Yeah, like
And then you're like, well, even the modern ones that you see today, like they date back to like the Triassic period. Like, holy
yeah,
cow! Like,
it's
what the
nuts.
heck?
They just may have gotten bigger or smaller. Like it's super cool.
But anyway, that's today's opening. Welcome guys to Life: The Complete Story. We're here. We're back. Today we're talking about some cool things. We're gonna be talking about Gars and Bowfin later on, but we'll start as we always do. Alex, you have
I'm Alex. That is Tyler.
yes,
As always.
as always.
You're a gracious host, but we start always with a little bit of nature in the news. Now, this week's article that I found, not quite as naturey as we usually go, but people are still nature, and bacteria, which we haven't covered yet, are still nature. But what this article comes from, it's from today. It was published today from Stanford Medicine. It is the kind of the summary is that scientists' findings in mice could translate to radical needle-free vaccination approach that eliminates reactions like fever, swelling, and pain.
Which
So
is super cool because I
that
hate needles.
I mean, they don't bother me much, but it sucks. Like your arm hurts, or like if you react to it, like when getting like the COVID vaccines. I know,
Yeah, the
especially
COVID
the
vac.
second one. Like I woke up that next day, I felt like I just got like punched.
Yeah, I have to get my flu vaccine every year, and it's like I'm fine the first day or two, and then like the weekend after, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got hit by a truck.
Yeah, I always get my flu vaccine now because I used to never get it, and then I got the flu real bad in high school, and then I always got it since then, except for 2 years ago. I didn't get it, and lo and behold, I got the flu, and it kicked my rear end pretty good. So what this article entails is the researchers from Stanford University. So it's an Ivy League, yeah, university in
It's like a kind of Ivy League school, but yeah,
it's a prominent university
it's a
in
very
the United
smart
States.
university.
Yes. So what they discovered is if they use a common bacteria that lives on the skin of pretty much every living person on the planet is Staphylococcus excuse me, I can't speak. Staphylococcus epidermidis, which is just what that kind of works out to be. It's like it's epidermis, like the outer layer of your skin. It's a bacteria that lives on your skin, pretty much harmless. They reside in hair follicles and things like that. Really, it doesn't cause any issues to the human body, but what they have discovered is that the body is fine with it as long as it stays on the outside, like on the outside of your skin. But say if you get something like a cut on your skin, the body reacts incredibly aggressively. The immune system reacts very aggressively to this bacteria, more than was expected by any of these researchers. Probably, I'm sure this actually helps with the immune response because that'll be probably one of the first things. Like if you get a cut, that'll be introduced into the bloodstream because it's right there on your skin. So if you get a cut or a puncture of any kind, it's going to introduce some of the staph epidermidis into your skin, causing your body to react. Well, the scientists figured out they may be able to get these bacteria. They may be able to add certain things to them, like we talked about a little bit, like with plastids, which it's like loose DNA that's not part of like the nucleus, quote unquote, because bacteria don't really have nuclei, but it's not part of their main DNA. It's like a separate little thing. they're able to introduce those, and from that cause different proteins from undesirable organisms, like invaders, things that make you sick. So those proteins show up on the staph epidermidis and cause that reaction, produce the antibody that your body naturally produces to fight these invaders, cause it to produce antibodies for different things that cause illness, and in such a way they may be able to kind of cause that. They were able to. I'm trying to. Here we go. Found it. What they did was they dipped a cotton swab into a vial containing the staph epidermidis, rub it gently on the head of a mouse, just a regular old mouse, didn't shave it, wash it, rinse its fur or anything, and put the mouse back in its cage. And after 6 weeks, they were wondering why the mouse's immune system had produced so many antibodies to that bacteria. I'm guessing it's something that doesn't usually live on mice the same way it lives on humans. And so with that, it actually had a higher concentration at the 6 weeks of those antibodies than it would through a regular vaccination. And they stayed at those higher levels almost like they had been vaccinated. So what they're thinking they can do is use this as a way to cause these immune responses without having to inject a vaccine. They'd be able to use these kind of bioengineered bacteria to just apply it almost like a cream or like a lotion, cause that immune response without having to do like an injection. So you take out the fear of needles in a lot of folks. They're still able to get vaccinated without having to get an injection, and because it causes such that strong immune response, they may be able to use that to actually make better vaccines. So it's still pretty early on yet. There's a lot of research they still need to do as far as how they can use this for other things, like especially viruses, like such as the cold, flu, COVID, that make the immune response more effective, longer lasting, things like that. So it's very, very interesting science that's being done.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty cool because it's one of those things where it's like, okay, modern viruses, like modern vaccines that we're doing, have the like you're inserting not a live virus, but you're inserting a dead virus into it, and your body is getting those antibodies. So now we're
Yeah.
just applying it to the skin instead, and
Yeah. And they also actually did kind of a gene encoding with some of the staph epidermidis to have the toxin that's in the tetanus bacteria. And so normal staph epidermidis was introduced to some of the mice, and then the bioengineered was introduced to other mice, and then they injected the mice with lethal doses of the tetanus toxin. And the ones that were given the natural bacteria all succumbed to the toxin. But all the ones that received that bioengineered version, they remained symptom free. They completely none of them died, from what it says here, and they didn't even show any symptoms of being intoxicated. So, I mean, that's huge.
right.
The fact that it caused such a big immune response, such an effective immune response for something that, of course, for a smaller organism like a mouse, the levels are different. But if they can get that to do something like diphtheria, polio, although polio's pretty well
Pretty much,
eradicated
yeah.
with the vaccine that there is now, but even for things like the flu, some of those illnesses that are still around that cause a lot of problems, like chickenpox, which eventually turns into shingles, and especially in like less developed countries where it's difficult to afford these vaccines, if they can get this to the point where it's cheaper and it's easier to administer, they could really put a dent in a lot of illnesses that in a first world country like where we live in the United States that we've more or less eradicated, or they're to the point where they're not a problem. But in those countries that don't have the medicine that we do, access to clean water, good food, things like that, those illnesses can be and a lot of times are deadly. This could help fight that, which is, I mean, this is super cool.
I
And
agree.
yeah, and they think it could work across the board for viruses, bacteria, fungi, single-celled parasites like malaria, things like that. It'd be very, very cool to see this research continue and get to a point where it actually is used.
And like you said, it's still early on. We're still in, lab testing phases on mice.
Yeah,
We
they're
haven't done it.
just tried it.
Yeah, there's no clinical tests on humans. It won't be for years to come. Anything else to add, Alex?
I mean, that's all I have for this. I just thought when I was looking for a news article, I saw this one pop up. I'm like, this is cool. I want to
Yeah.
talk about this one for sure.
That's perfect. I enjoyed it a lot. And with that, we'll move on into our lesson for today. Today I have titled our lesson, Apex Predators, Gars and Bowfin.
Ooh.
In case you couldn't tell based off of our title, we're going to be talking about the Gars and Bowfin today. They fall into the group Holosti, the group of rayfin bony fish. So this is the second of 3 groups of rayfin bony fish. The first being, what did we talk about last week? The sturgeons. I forgot their
Sturgeon paddlefish.
Cladistia
Yes.
of chondrosti and chondrosti. Yeah, okay. And now we're talking about Holosti. Perfect.
These guys.
Yeah. That followed forest is an ancestor. Like, that's an definition of an ancestor. Yeah, this is the second group of rayfin bony fish. Next, we're going to be getting into Telosti, which is the last group. We're going to start talking about Telosti. Telosti is like 95% of all living fish species.
That's the rest of the rayfin fish.
Yeah.
Which, when you think of fish, this is usually what you're going to think of.
Yeah. So there's 2 major clades in Holosti, Helicomorphi and Ginglimodi. So Ginglimodi is going to be the gars, and Helicomorphi is going to be your bowfin. The earliest members, Acentrophus and Archaeolepidotus, date back to the Middle Permian period. So that's well before a lot of things. This is like going back right before dinosaurs, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, the Middle Permian, that's from about 300 million years ago, about 252 million years ago.
Right. These guys have reduced spiracles. We talked about spiracles with the sharks and with the sturgeon. So these guys have spiracles that are basically, they don't go the whole way through. They don't make it to the outside of the body.
That's especially true for the gar.
Right. They have lightly ossified bones, so as we talked about the last couple groups, they don't have per se like ossification in their bones. They have like a bone structure, but it's not quite what we think of as bone per se.
It's not the way that the rest of the fish are.
Right. And members have thick ganoid scales. I don't know if we covered ganoid scales last week or not, but ganoid scales are very thick, plate-like, kind of diamond, rhombus shaped. They, like, when you think of normal fish scale, they kind of like overlap, like plate mail, like from knights or something like that. This is more like thick, like steel, just a thick piece of steel. So that, and they have a lot of other characteristics that are kind of like a mixture of like, it's like the intermediate between the chondrichthyes and the teleosts. And they have that respiratory swim bladder we talked about sometime. I don't remember when, but it's like in the beachers where it's like, okay, they use that swim bladder as like a partial lung. So sometimes you'll see these bowfin and gars come up to the surface and take like a gulp of air. That's them filling that swim bladder, and they use that in oxygen deficient or highly acidic waters.
Okay, yeah, I know the gar. You see the most concentrations like in the American South, like the gar and bowfin, especially if you think like the swamps, the bayous of Louisiana and that Gulf Coast. In some of those areas, they're pretty stagnant. There's not a lot of oxygen, but these fish still thrive there.
Yeah. So with that, we'll move into the first group. We're going to be talking about the ammoforms, which are the bowfin in that Helicomorphy clade. So the whole clade covers the bowfin and all their ancestors and things like that. The Ammoforms are the genus of, or the family that contains the genus Amia, which are the bowfins. So it includes the two species, Amia calva, and the newly named, I guess you'd say, because it's like a subspecies of, but is now recognized as its own species, Amia osilicata, which is like spot fin bowfin or something along those lines.
Okay.
They're found in freshwater systems of North America, but there have been fossils found in the European and Asian continent, like the Eurasian continent. And these guys first appeared, like the actual bowfins themselves, appeared 250 million years ago during the Triassic. So they kind of split off into their own group that long ago. So they're demersal piscivores. So piscivore means they eat fish, and demersal means it's a bottom dweller. As you can see in the picture, this is obviously a bowfin in some type of aquaculture, whether it's a home aquarium or a commercial aquarium. But it just kind of sits on the bottom of your riverbed, lake bed, whatever. They are bimodal breathers, which is that they use their gills, but they still have that respiratory swim bladder they can use. They're about 20 inches long, but there have been some specimens that have grown up to 43 inches and 21 pounds. And fish kind of confuse me, because a lot of times they're a lot lighter than what I think they should be.
Especially for their size, yeah.
Yeah. Because like 43 inches is like almost 4 feet. And the fact that it's 21 pounds is, I guess there's not a lot of width to it.
Yeah. Typically they get longer and they get a little like
Girthier.
Yeah, like fatter. Like they get bigger like vertically. Dorso-ventrally, to use fancy science words.
As you'll see with most of the species we'll talk about today, they have elongated cylindrical bodies, kind of like a torpedo shape, is the term we're going to be using a lot today. They have a two-layered skull, the dermatocranium and the chondrocranium. You can't see that chondrocranium because it is kind of like that internal part of the skull. You have to get through the dermatocranium first. And that dermatocranium is comprised of 28 fused bones to create the entirety of the skull. They have two sets of teeth, a large set they use to grasp their prey, and then they have a smaller set of tooth patches. And when I think more like a catfish, they have like the sandpapery teeth.
Yeah.
Think of that. They use this set to grind down some larger prey.
Okay. And this is something we see a lot in fish. They'll have multiple sets of teeth, or even something you'll see, especially with the eels, they actually have pharyngeal jaws, which means they have a second set of jaws inside of their mouth into the throat. So this is kind of an earlier version of that.
Yes. And so these bowfin and gars, some of the earliest species to evolve jaws with teeth, like tooth jaws, because like when you think some of the earliest jawed species are like the ones that were just the plate that just kind of like snaps open and close, and there's no real teeth behind it. So you had to evolve those jaws so you could actually like grasp prey, and so you could eat bigger prey, because you're a bigger fish now. You need more nutrients to survive. You can't just kind of sit there and lay in wait like a hagfish or a lamprey and just suck. They are phystostomoic, which means that they have that pneumatic duct that connects their swim bladder to their digestive system. And I feel like that's just so that the air that they get when they like eat, like it all goes down the same pipe, and it just sorts, like kind of like what do we have? Like we have the thing in our trachea that kind of like, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the epiglottis.
Opens up whenever you eat,
Yeah,
so the food goes down.
It separates your windpipe and your esophagus.
Yeah, I'd assume they have something similar to that, so that the food doesn't go in their swim bladder and the air doesn't go in their digestive tract. Moving on. So their blood is adapted to warmer. I said in the notes I put warm acidic, but it's more like they can survive in the acidic water if they have to. They prefer 65 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and anything colder than 50 degrees, they really kind of just shut down and go stagnant.
I mean, that happens to a lot of fish.
Yeah.
Once it gets so cold, their body's not really able to function the way it's supposed to, so they kind of, at least at first, they get real sluggish and slow. They don't feed much, kind of. It's not quite like a hibernation, but gets to that point. But if it gets too cold, of course, they
Right. Because they can use that swim bladder as like a pseudo lung, they are able to survive out of water for a very long time, upwards of 24 hours, topping out at around 5 days, which is kind of
yeah, that's
bonkers.
impressive. That is very impressive.
So they reach their sexual maturity at about 2 to 3 years, depending on male or female. And some species are known to live, like some individuals have lived up to 33 years in the wild, and you hit around 30 years in captivity.
Yeah, which is actually kind of backwards. Usually organisms live longer in captivity because they're fed regularly. They don't really have to compete for food or not being predated upon.
Right. So their spawning season's typically, I believe, springtime. And it's kind of like one of those things where it's like the males fertilize a lot of eggs that aren't exactly all from one female, and the females lay their eggs in a lot of dens that aren't exactly one male's.
So it's a whole big
It's
party.
a swinger party.
I don't know if I would really use that term for it, but
Close enough.
yeah, there's a lot of genetic diversity being caused by this because it's not just one male, one female.
Yeah.
For a whole bunch of eggs, which here in your next point.
Yeah. So once the female spawns, once they lay their eggs, they bounce. They scurry out. The male does his thing. There's a special term for external fertilization in water. I forget what it's called.
Like broadcast fertilization, kind of. I forget.
You're gonna make me look it up, aren't you?
Maybe. Well, he looks that up there. It does say the males actually do stay behind to protect the eggs while they incubate, which is not something you see a lot in the animal kingdom. You see it more in fish, though, which is kind of strange. You do see it a good bit in fish where the female will leave and the male will remain to protect the eggs, and this can be a significant number of eggs, somewhere between 2,000 to 5,000 eggs. So it is quite a bit, a significant number, and that's in one den. And you think about how Tyler said you have a lot of females in each den, and a lot of females going to multiple different dens. There's that contributes to a good amount of diversity within the bowfin.
I found my term.
What is your term?
Milt.
Milt.
Milt is the conglomeration of fluids that escape the male to fertilize
The eggs.
the eggs. Yes.
Okay. Interesting. That's a strange word for that.
Yeah, I was deep in.
I was expecting a much fancier sounding word. I don't know why.
Milt.
Alrighty then.
Did you cover the next bullet point?
I did. I covered about males protecting the nest and the number of eggs, but I did not go past that.
We'll move on then. So, bowfin, they have a variety of issues that go on. Not as many as some other fish we'll talk about in the next few weeks. Looking at you, ocean sunfish. But they do have their own host of parasites. They can get some anchor worms, which are able to slow growth and even kill their host. They kind of live in the gill slits of their host.
As many aquatic parasites do.
Yeah.
Or at least fish parasites.
There's also a mollusk, Megaloneus gigantea, that lays eggs in their gills, and some other things develop. And they can also have liver cancer and leukemia.
What?
That's
I mean,
like
I'm sure that's probably more in some of the captive species, but still, you don't hear a lot of wild animals
with
get
cancer. I mean,
because
I
they
just
usually don't live that long for us to know about it.
yeah, and really any organism can get cancer because all cancer is an abnormal growth of cells. So anything can get cancer,
Yeah.
even
It's just
plants, technically.
yeah, I mean, it is quite possible. That's kind of when you see like cankers on plants, that's sort of what they are. That is very, very odd. Especially so specific too. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, usually you get a lot of like skin cancers, sort of things like goldfish that'll get like abnormal growths a lot, especially on their heads.
Yeah. So bowfin, not exactly every sport fisherman's prize. I'm not really a fisherman. Like me and Alex like to go fish together. We have done it in the past, but obviously we're a little bit too far north to really bowfin
Well, it's
fish.
more of a we don't fish a lot in areas where you would probably find bowfin.
Yeah.
They do exist in our area. I know because they're in the pamphlet that the Fish Commission gives out, but you don't see them a lot. I think it's
Now,
just because where we're at, it's a lot of very warm, shallow waters, shallower,
yeah.
like just more like small lakes and ponds, things like that. We would need to go either up north to like Lake Erie, like the Great Lakes, or get into like the big river systems around us.
But and since no one really uses them for sport fishing, they really didn't have much commercial value to us either. They have poor tasting flesh.
They are bottom feeders.
They are bottom feeders, so they kind of taste like the bottom of a river. But through smoking, frying, as well as some more culinary cuisine like fish cakes, they have found their way to your dinner table. The roe is go ahead.
I would say just is not very often. I'm sure, especially in the South where you see a lot more of them, they're not as well. Not
Right. Bowfin roe, so that's the eggs, is processed into Cajun caviar, a cheaper, more sustainable source of caviar in comparison to the sturgeons that we talked about last week. We kind of covered that's how a lot of these species are so endangered because they've been hit by caviar farming and over harvesting for caviar.
fortunately. I mean, the bowfin have the advantage over the sturgeon. They reach maturity much sooner. They don't live as long, but they reach maturity sooner, and they lay a lot of eggs.
And since this is America and we just kind of dump our waste wherever we please, bioaccumulation and biomagnification are major factors when it comes to really any aquatic life you're planning on eating. But be especially careful if you choose to eat these and you live in an area with high levels of mercury, arsenic, chromium, or copper, because as we might have talked about previously on the show, bioaccumulation is how these small, like, a fish will eat small amounts of mercury in its food, and as it kind of does that, it just kind of sits in their bodies and just accumulates over time until the next thing eats it and they get all the leftovers that were there.
And then they accumulate it, and the levels just get greater as you go up the trophic levels.
And that's called biomagnification. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, wonderful. Let's go with that.
Yeah. Now, Alex, let's interact here for a little bit. What does the bowfin look like to you?
I mean, do you want the answer? Do you want the technical answer? Or like the I know there's an invasive species that it looks like. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah. What is?
So the bowfin is often mistaken isn't a word. Mistaken for the snakehead, which is
Yes.
an invasive fish in the United States. I know for sure, possibly in other areas of the world. It looks a lot like the bowfin, very similar to especially to the untrained eye. They look very similar, and a lot of times bowfin are actually caught and killed because they are thought of as snakehead.
Here I have an image I'd like to share.
Yeah, if you want to put
That's
a
a video.
combination.
That's a video. I just want the picture. Here we go. This is a better picture. I had it. Open in new tab and share screen. Ta-da!
There you go.
So very similar to like the untrained eye. Elongated body, long dorsal fin, some type of modeling on the body. Really, your only difference is in your anal fin. The bowfin has that shorter anal fin, and the snakehead has a long, extended, frilly anal fin.
Yeah, and as you can see, the snakehead is called the snakehead because the front of its face looks very similar to a snake, whereas the bowfin it's much more rounded, more fish-like. But especially that anal fin will be your biggest indicator of if it is a snakehead or a bowfin, as well as you see that black spot that is sometimes present on the tail fin, the caudal fin. And the bowfin it looks like they have a much less spread out, kind of more rounded caudal fin, whereas the snakehead is more
fanned.
Yeah, it is more fanned out.
All right. So that's gonna do it for our bowfin portion. We'll move on to Ginglamodi. Alex, would you like to
Yes,
cover this?
sir.
You want me to keep rolling?
I can cover this one. Just give you a break. You've been talking a whole lot. Not a dig at you, just a simple.
Let the people listen.
Yeah. I'll pull up a picture real quick because I got one on deck. Bingo. There we go.
That's a spotted gar.
That is an alligator gar.
Mother.
It should be an alligator. Well, it may be.
Nah.
It should be an alligator gar. It looks very similar. I don't know, because the spots are throwing me off now that you say that. But when I Googled alligator gar, that is what came up. So it's got the teeth like it. But we'll talk about them later. So Gangliomodi is a clade that contains, of course, the modern gar, as well as all the extinct relatives dating back to the Triassic period, with the earliest members being the Eosimiantus. Ooh, that's a funky. Too many vowels together.
They do this with all these extinct species. They just throw letters out there. Like
It seems like
no one's gonna care about them because they're dead.
Yeah, a lot of them are Latin too, which is not a language that we speak.
True.
But they are very diverse and widespread throughout most of the Mesozoic, but the lineage has decreased tremendously to the modern day. It first evolved in marine habitats, but many groups did transition over into freshwater habitats. Early non-gar species of Gangliomodi underwent a convergent evolution, which means they kind of separately evolved to a similar point in some traits that are similar to modern carp. So they indicates kind of a similar niche within the environment. And this leads us to our, I think it is a family.
Yeah, it should be the family.
Yeah.
Lepisodidae.
Yes. So Lepisodidae.
Sauced.
So this is the gar, comprised of 7 different species and 2 genera. They inhabit fresh and brackish water, occasionally found in marine waters, but not near as often. Primarily in the eastern United States, Central America, and Cuba. There are extinct members that have been found worldwide, but they are no longer present in the rest of the world. And these are the only surviving members of Gangliomodi. So it's just the gar in this family that remain from this whole big group. They possess elongated bodies, like we talked about before, with those thick ganoid scales. They have very elongated jaws with sharp teeth, as you can see in the picture here. Keep looking at the picture. It almost makes it look more like a pike here.
Well, here's the thing.
I'll let you find a better picture if you would like to.
So there was a species found in the Atlantic Ocean that was initially called the gar.
Okay.
And and it looked a lot like the gar we know of today.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we call these gar. But like to distinguish them, we used to call these gar pike because they looked more pike-like.
Okay, so
So
maybe
you're not
almost like
completely wrong.
okay. I mean, they occupy very similar niches within the ecosystem. They
They
are
do.
upper level, close to apex predators, but so they have those elongated jaws with sharp teeth. They all gar are fairly large, but of course the alligator gar is the largest, growing upwards of 6 feet and 100 pounds. The largest, what did I find there is the largest, the world record alligator gar was 8.5 feet and 327 pounds. But that is the world record that was caught. So they can actually grow larger than that. I'm sure in captivity they get larger. They have very vascularized swim bladders, which allows them to breathe air like we talked about before. They do have edible flesh, and the scales are often used by humans, but the eggs are highly toxic due to the presence of ichthyotoxin.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure which specific ichthyotoxin it is, but it's kind of like a coating on the egg,
Okay.
and that it kind of deters bass and other
Yeah.
predators from eating it.
Okay. So that's a pretty cool adaptation. Possess heterocircle tails with dorsal fins that are fairly close to the tail, as you can see in the pictures there. Going into the genus Atractosteus. Man, I'm struggling with names today. I'm usually better than this.
And now we flip-flop today.
Yeah, this contains 3 extant species, all being widely separated geographically. First appearing in the late Cretaceous, of course, the alligator gar, which is, as we said, the largest gar species and one of the largest fish in North America. The name comes from a resemblance to the American alligator, especially with the head, having that very kind of large, rounded snout, as opposed to some of the other, like the long-nosed gar, which is a very long but narrow snout. Yeah, there you go. The picture that Tyler's pulled up. Of course, they have that torpedo-shaped body, kind of a brownish olive color, fading to a light gray to yellow on their underbelly. That upper jaw has 2 rows of large, sharp teeth that they use to grab and hold on to prey. They are ambush predators, feeding primarily on fish, but they have been known to eat waterfowl that land on the water, as well as small mammals that are either swimming or probably even some, maybe if they're right on the water's edge. But I guess swimming is more likely the case. Population range, though, has been decimated due to a number of human factors, as with a lot of other fish, especially these kind of apex predators. Previously thought of as more of a nuisance or trash fish, but it has become a very popular sport fish in recent. Next in this group is the Cuban gar, of course, hailing from the rivers and lakes of Cuba, as well as Isla de la Juventud, I think is.
Close enough.
Yeah, close enough. I don't know. My Spanish is not as good as it used to be. Of course, a tropical freshwater species, occasionally venturing into brackish water, especially those rivers. Solitary hunters that really only meet with other species of their members to breed, where parties of up to 20 are formed. Typically only reach a size of about 3 feet, but they can grow twice as large. As with the other gar, they're able to withstand high nitrate and ammonia levels, so very poor water qualities, as well as breathe air, not just get oxygen through their gills. Adults, of course, are higher end predators that feed on other fish and birds, while juveniles tend to fall prey to other large fish predators like the largemouth bass. And these are currently critically endangered.
They're just little guys. Like, look how cute he is.
He's a little guy, yeah, little man. Now imagine
man.
that. Imagine that 6 feet long trying to take a nip at you. Not as cute.
Well,
Still
okay.
not quite like the alligator gar. Those guys are kind of ugly.
True.
And then the last species of this genus is the tropical gar, found often in ocean drainages from Mexico to Costa Rica, so that's Central America, inhabiting fresh and brackish waters of rivers, floodplains, and lakes. tend to avoid stronger currents, so they really like slow-moving water. So you probably see those on the lower, warmer waters of rivers that move much slower. And compared to the other members of the genus, they are small, really only growing up to 4 foot long and about 7 pounds. And they're more often than not are smaller, similar to the long-nosed gar, but it actually has a shorter, broader snout than it does the real long, narrow snout of the long-nosed gar. And the diet consists mostly of cichlids, which are the fish we talked about 2 weeks ago. Yes, 2 weeks ago, I believe.
We haven't talked about them yet.
Cichlids? I thought they were.
We talked about beachers.
I thought beachers were cichlids.
No, cichlids are like tilapia and like things of that nature.
Okay. Okay.
They're like, yeah, no,
I'm having a brain fart. I'm having a day. Apparently,
it's been a day.
Yes, it has. And then next is the genus Lepistosteus. These
Yes.
are freshwater fish, but able to survive in areas of low oxygen, high salinity. Typically schooling fish, ranging from Florida all the way up to Quebec, depending on the species. So from the southern part of the United States to all the way up into Canada. The colors vary a lot depending on water clarity, from a greenish silver in clear water to more of an olive and brown in cloudy water. Sizes vary from 35 to 78 inches, so from about 3 feet upwards of, I think that's 6 to 7 feet, 6.5.
I probably wrote it wrong, yeah.
Females live up to 22 years, but males usually last about half that time, only 11 years. Their diet varies greatly from buffalo fish to blue crab and even the invasive Asian carp. That'll come up later. And it contains 4 species in this genus. The spotted gar, named after, of course, the abundance of spots on its body and head. They're smaller species, really only about 3 feet and 6 pounds, ranging from southern Ontario, so again, Canada, into Florida and west to Texas. So from Canada to the southern United States. They prefer clear, slower moving creeks, rivers, and lakes. Diet primarily of shrimp, minnows, warmouth, bluegill, spotted sunfish. So your smaller, kind of bottom level fish. Males living about 8 years, females 10. But the females do lay about 13,000 eggs in a single spawning season, which hatch in 2 weeks. So they lay a significant number of eggs for one female. That's impressive. The long-nosed gar, which I talked about a little bit before, is kind of an olive brown to greenish color that again has that torpedo-shaped body. Typically, they inhabit like freshwater lakes, brackish coastal water, swamps, things of that nature. This is probably what you think of when you think of a gar.
Yeah, I'd say for most individuals, yeah, this is probably one that you'll see in your aquariums most often.
Yes. Ranging along the east coast of the United States, all the way over to Kansas, Texas, and New Mexico, so into kind of that, even into the American West, Southwest. They are typically nocturnal feeders, preying on insects and other crustaceans, living 15 to 20 years, but there has been reports of some living up to 39 years. And they exhibit a noticeable sexual dimorphism where the females are much larger than the males, which you see a good bit in, especially like things like fish, even in
the anglerfish is the best example.
Yes, the anglerfish is the most, I'd say the best kind of most typical or like phototypical example. I think that's right. Stereotypical would probably be the better word. Example of that sexual dimorphism. Our next species is the short-nosed gar, which is another ambush predator that feeds on fish, insects, crustaceans. That same body style as the rest of the gar. They do lack that upper jaw that, like the alligator gar, they have kind of a long snout they lack the upper jaw of the alligator gar, the long snout of a long-nosed gar, and the markings of a spotted gar. What?
Yeah, so the alligator gar has 2 rows of teeth in its upper jaw. So it's lacking that. It's got this shorter snout than the long-nosed gar.
Okay.
So that's how you differentiate it from everything.
Okay. Okay, that makes more sense. So it's got that shorter a shorter snout that's not quite as wide as the alligator gar, and it's pretty plain as far as its coloration, as you can see in the picture there. Okay, that was a funky.
Yeah,
Now that not
I wrote it poorly.
is kind of, it was a little funky. I will say that. They do reach up to 35 inches, about 3 feet, but mostly found around that 2 foot range. Prefer large rivers and lakes, occupying mostly the Missouri and Mississippi River basins, which are a couple of the largest river basins in the United States. And then our last species for the day within our groups is the Florida gar, which are also fairly small, reaching over 3 foot in length and up to about 10 pounds. They inhabit the Savannah River and the Ochlockonee River basins. The young feed a lot on zooplankton and insect larvae, while the adults, like the rest of the gar, feed on fish, shrimp, crayfish, and those invertebrates. They have kind of an irregular black spotting along the body, as you can see in our picture here. They have a much shorter, broader snout than some of the other gar. They have irregularly spaced teeth, so they don't have like an even row of teeth. They're kind of all over the place. They actually tend to burrow into the sediment during the drier seasons in Florida. I'm sure that's a kind of a way to survive. They may kind of undergo sort of a hibernation sort of thing if it gets too dry, I'm sure. And they're very fast. That they strike their prey in like 20 to 40 milliseconds. So they're very quick when they hunt. But that will do it for our lesson for today. Do you want to do your amazing species first, or do you want me to do my most wanted first?
I'll give you a little break from talking. I'll talk about my amazing species. Technically, we already covered it today. It's
Yes.
the Mangiari, also known as the Cuban gar. It's critically endangered, as we kind of alluded to. Really, it's only on, like, I don't know if Alex wants. Oh, I should probably stop sharing so Alex can share.
I'll pull up the map, actually.
That's exactly what I want.
Look it up. Same
Perfect.
wavelength.
So those orange spots on the map for our visual listeners,
Our
those are
viewers, visual listeners, viewers.
Yep, them.
Yeah, them.
Only a couple like actual spots where it's confirmed to be a resident species at. The Isla de la Juventud, as we talked about, as well as some of the regions along the southern coast of Cuba.
Yeah, the kind of southern and western coast.
But it is possible that it lives on the majority of the western part of the island. It hasn't been confirmed nor denied. The last evaluation was in 2020, 2021 was published, so it's pretty recent. It was critically endangered. This was the first real assessment of it. It's decreasing, lives in freshwater, inland waters, with a generation length from about 15.5 to 39 years. So a decent amount of time per generation.
Yeah, especially for a smaller fish.
Right. And we're calling it critically endangered because the population is supposedly declined 90%, as well as this fragmentation in population. So really, anytime you see population fragments, the rating, like your IUCN rating, is going to go down tremendously because you're narrowing the gene pool and you're providing less of a chance of survival in these fragments. A lot of the threats that these guys are under: housing in urban areas and commercial developments, us building new things in their area, harvesting, fishing, runoff water from like agriculture, industry, even just urban wastewater from like just urban brown water. Some roads and railroads, so like not that it snows in Cuba, but like salt would be something that we'd consider there.
Or just built the building of these transportation corridors
Right.
destroying habitat.
The invasive African walking catfish is a threat. It was introduced throughout much of Cuba, and the adults in that of the catfish are believed to outcompete the gar. A lot of other things, like largemouth bass, also contribute to the decline. And then something else is there's introduced species of tilapia, which might compete with prey species of the gar, and the gar hasn't adjusted to consuming the tilapia instead.
Okay.
There is conservation in place. It's in protected areas. There is education and awareness programs, and there is species management on site, and there is a recovery plan.
That's good, at least that they're at least trying to help it the best they can.
They're trying their best, but I don't know how much help it's going to be, because really step one is solving the invasive species program
Which is very difficult at this point.
Yeah. That's the quick little overview that I had on our Cuban gar known as Manjuari. And with that, Alex has his most wanted for the day.
Yes, sir. So my most wanted is not, it itself is not invasive, but I wanted to talk about this because it's topical for what we're doing today, and it does involve invasive species. So as we talked about earlier, the alligator gar that kind of was once thought of as a kind of a junk fish, really not important fish, and it was something that actually threatened regular sport fish. So a lot of fishermen would catch it, kill it, try to get rid of it some way. But it has been seen that it is actually becoming a very important factor in fighting the Asian carp. So, as we said, this is one of the largest fish in the United States. It's the second largest after the white sturgeon of the U.S. West Coast, sturgeon we talked about last week. And they have shown kind of a taste for the Asian carp, which of course has been spreading rapidly and outcompeting native fish for food a lot, especially in the American South. And it's making its way further inland up the rivers. And the biggest factor with this is because the alligator gar gets so large. I mean, it dwarfs these Asian carp, which only get a few feet long, like a foot or two long. A lot of times alligator gar grow like 4 foot and 100 pounds, but as I said earlier, the world record gar that was caught was 8.5 feet and 327 pounds, but they could grow larger. So these predators are much larger than the Asian carp, and because they have shown themselves to be predators of the carp, there is a fair amount that is being done to actually help kind of protect the alligator gar a little bit, because it is beginning to feed a lot on the carp. Now, they don't really think it's going to be the silver bullet that'll help control the carp, but it will definitely help slow them down, because even though the carp reproduce very quickly, the alligator gar grows very quickly, and because of that, it needs a lot of food, so they can eat a lot of the invasive carp. And they're optimistic, at least, that the impact of the gar will have against the Asian carp. And it said in some of the research here, an ecologist from the Missouri State Fish Commission said pretty much the best way to control the carp is when they are smaller, before they get a chance to spawn. And this is where the alligator gar comes in as a whole, because as they're growing, they're able to feed on those smaller carp and then continue to feed on them as they get really big. Something that, while more research needs done, it's kind of a way to control an invasive species, was something we've talked about a lot, like biocontrol of invasive species, especially in invasive animals, is something that can be very effective, especially in the case of this, where a native species is helping to control an overabundance of an invasive species. That's pretty much best case scenario, actually. And a lot of the ecologists that are looking at this, they are really hoping that they're able to push fishermen to kind of do their best to help protect the alligator gar and use it so they can use it as this biocontrol as well, promoting kind of a healthier fishery overall and improve the whole ecosystem in this way. So it's something that, like I said, the alligator gar itself isn't invasive, but it's a huge step in controlling the Asian carp, which I talked about a while ago now.
Oh yeah.
So which is something that as I talked about it, it's becoming a very big problem. I mean, you'll see hundreds and thousands of them in fairly small area, and they outcompete native fish like nothing else, eat all the food, and it just becomes a problem for the whole ecosystem. So having a big potential threat to the invasive species in the alligator gar is something that really needs to be pushed more. They continue to spearhead using the gar as a way
Right.
to.
It's not every day that a native species turns out to be a aid for bio control
Yes.
of invasives. Typically, when you do something like this, it's like, well, here's this invasive species that's gone rampant, that's out of control. What are we going to do? And typically, the answer is, well, let's bring in their predator from over yonder, and he'll fix the problem. And then you just create more problems.
Yeah, like you said, it can be good at first until it starts to control to a lot of the original invasive, and then it itself starts to become invasive, and you've just continued your issue.
Right.
And like one quote from the article I found on this, it said it's pretty rare that we get to fix a mistake, especially with invasive species. It's very rare that we get a chance to actually maybe try to control something and keep it from getting worse. So obviously it's pretty early yet to tell, but hopefully over time, as more gar start to feed on these invasive carp, that they continue to really seek them out and start to control those populations that have just gotten out of control at this point. And there's something that the alligator gar are being introduced into some areas as well to kind of help with that, such as like Illinois, Missouri, not just the American Southeast,
Right.
because they are able to control the Asian carp.
Understood.
But that is all I have for my most wanted this week. My most wanted, but for a different reason.
Pretty
And
much.
and so then we'll go to our last segment of the episode, which is Tyler's From the Vault. What do we got in history this time?
So today we're going to be talking about an extinct genus of gar. We're going to be talking about the genus Grande marinus. It's named after the biologist Lance Grande. That's where the genus name comes from. It's an individual species in this genus, Grande marinus garrisensis, and it's named after the wadi Wade Garris, which is a wadi is kind of like the floodplain river valley that these fossils were found near. So there have been 3 specimens found so far. A fully preserved specimen, which Alex has the picture of, found in the Turonian Acrobau Formation in Morocco. It was found in the house of a local collector, actually, so this wasn't actually like in the formation when we found it.
Okay.
Then a private collector purchased it before it was donated to science. This Acrobo formation in Morocco. So when we talked about gars today, they were all freshwater, brackish water, not really marine species, but this was believed to be a pelagic ecosystem way back when.
So a big open water marine ecosystem.
Right. So that's a completely different area than what we're seeing modern gar, like slow moving lakes, rivers, things like that. They don't really like fast moving water. They don't like the open ocean, really. So we're thinking this is like kind of a late surviving member of marine gars based off the time period of the Cretaceous. A descendant of I went to the freshwater, I didn't like it, so I moved back home.
Okay. But
It has
a pretty early descendant of freshwater gar.
yeah. It's compared to some other fossilized gars, it's got a pretty stubby snout in comparison. And so its anatomy says so it shows it's more like our modern day Lepisosteus and Atractosteus gars in terms of anatomically.
Okay.
But that's really all that I have for today's Vault. Kind of short, kind of simple. Fossilized evidence is it's kind of hard to do any type of research on since you can't go back in time and see it.
Unfortunately, especially when you only have a handful of species, or specimens, I should say, to work with.
Right. But it's something cool. It's kind of like fitting the puzzle pieces. This is
absolutely
Life the Complete Story, and it wouldn't be Life the Complete Story if we didn't give you the complete story.
Yeah, you gotta, as we said, that phylogenetic tree. This is part of it. It's a little further down the tree, a little earlier on, but it's an important part of it. It's what led to what we have today.
Right, and with that, that's going to conclude our show. And remember, guys, if you haven't already, make sure to follow us on Spotify at Life the Complete Story. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Life the Complete Story. Make sure you are liking, sharing, commenting, whatever you can do on that. It helps us out tremendously. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Life Complete Story. We fixed our clips. They will be back up and running. I am going to talk to John immediately after recording.
Okay. Sweet.
Follow us on TikTok at Life Complete Story. Follow us on Facebook at Life the Complete Story. I'm still slow on Facebook posts, but it's okay. That's really going to be more for news articles, and when I find them, I'll put them on there. And right now, nothing's really interesting me in terms of articles. Am I missing anything, Alex?
I think you got Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, it's about right. And then of course, if you want to send us like an email, lifecompletestory@gmail.com. I haven't been able to look at it for a little while, but I don't know if you've had a chance. If you got something that's a little longer, more in depth that you can't necessarily put in like a YouTube or a Instagram comment, something like that, email us if it's something that you really want to see, hear about, you know a lot about, you want to tell us about it. We would love to be able to read those and use those for future episodes.
Because we're not experts, we're not claiming to be experts, we're really just trying to provide a mouthpiece for everybody to kind of dip their toes into things and find something they're passionate about.
Absolutely.
In the animal kingdom. But I've been Tyler.
And I am Alex, and thank you all so much for joining us this week for Life the Complete Story. And as we always say at the end of every episode, keep learning, learn something
new.
Never know what you'll find interesting.
And we'll see you guys next week for Telostai.
Yes, sir. Have a good one, everyone.